Hey there, my name's Niandra. We recently learned that Overwatch 2 will be moving from 6v6 to 5v5. Instead of 2 tanks, there'll only be 1. Now, there's been a lot of mixed views on this, and I've seen a ton of negativity towards it. Generally, I'm at a point where my attitude towards Overwatch 2 is cautious optimism, and I don't inherently hate the idea of 5v5, so I wanted to quickly talk about why it might not be that bad. The way I'm kind of looking at it is that while players may not like the change, 5v5 might be healthier for the game overall in the long run. Sometimes these two things don't overlap, and I think it's easy to struggle with that when something is so important to you personally. Anyway, my reasoning behind this is that tank has always been the least played role by miles. I say this with absolute sincerity, but if you have an issue with this change but don't play tank, what would make you play it? Because at this point, Blizzard have had 5 years to convince people with really not much success. If you're at a point where you need to bribe people to play tank, then something has absolutely gone wrong somewhere. Then again, maybe we wouldn't be in this spot if Blizzard were more active and aggressive with their balancing. There's so much stuff I saw during this 2-hour presentation where I was thinking, okay, this is really cool, why didn't we get this in 2019 after Roll Q was dropped? Because if you'll remember, patches were really infrequent after Roll Lock was introduced, despite it fundamentally changing the game. Some players have mentioned that it'll be sad to lose 2 tank players coordinating with each other, which I think is perfectly valid. Monkey D.Va and Rein Zarya are both staples of the game. However, I also feel like they highlight how rigid the role is, because who wants D.Va Zarya on their team? There's also been quite a few times where tanks have caused issues for the game with goats and double shield, and even then it's still people don't want to play them even then. Plus on the flip side, this also means that tank players aren't forced to work around Roadhog or Wrecking Ball 1 tricks. Personally, I really enjoy playing off tank but not main tank, and I don't think I'm the only one who feels this way. If I were to queue for the role right now and I was put on a team with someone who also prefers or only plays off tank, we've now forced 4 other people into an awkward position. With 5v5, it's safe to assume that the tanks will be changed to compensate for the lack of partner, and if Blizzard can manage to make the non-shield tanks on par with the shield ones, then I think we potentially end up in a really good spot where tank feels enticing to play. I've heard a few people say they don't play tank because they find it stressful, which honestly is so valid. Main tank is basically being the team leader, and not everyone wants that responsibility, especially if you're more casual. Losing another tank to fall back on could definitely add to that stress, but on the other hand, this does mean the healers can focus on the singular tank better. I've heard the term main tank difference been thrown about so many times in the last year, so a part of me is kinda surprised to see such a strong and negative reaction about making Overwatch less dependent on them. Ultimately, the way I see it is that 5v5 isn't an inherently bad idea. What counts is how the developers end up balancing for it, and if you don't have faith in Blizzard to handle that well, that's perfectly valid. Their track record, definitely questionable in places. Watching the presentation, I was worried watching snipers still be able to one-shot squishies with a headshot, but it's worth keeping in mind that nothing we saw today is guaranteed. It sounded like they have a lot of character reworks on the table. Another thing I keep coming back to over and over again is Overwatch's lack of tutorials. I feel like with both DPS and support, it's immediately more obvious what your job is. Granted, a lot of people do equate support with healer instead of seeing the role as healing plus utility, but that's not the end of the world. It's a lot harder to explain tank to a new player since you also need to introduce concepts like creating space, zoning, and how your other team's punching back. Anyway, in my mind, I do wonder, would we be in a position where we need to remove a tank if, from day one, we had better in-game support for players? Unless someone invents a time machine in the next year, we won't ever know the answer, and sometimes developers do have to live with the consequences of choices made when their game was in the infancy stage where no one really knew what they were doing. I guess that kind of sums it up where I am in general, where it's Overwatch should not have been allowed to get to the stage that it's currently in, but it did, so let's focus on how to get out of it. One serious criticism I did see of 5v5 is that it potentially puts the jobs of OWL tank players in danger. The idea is that teams may not need as many tank players, which I don't have much to say about, but yeah, that seems like a really valid concern. However, Overwatch in its current state isn't exactly holding on to pro players either. If the game doesn't have a sturdy core or foundation, those players might just lose their jobs anyway. But yeah, that's all from me for this quick little rambly video. It might not even make any sense. Hope you liked it. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you disagree or agree or whatever. And have a nice day.